my pleasure now to bring on John W. McCaskill, historian, educator, and reenactor from History Alive. John, thank you for joining us here this Memorial Day weekend to Let's Talk. How are things going?
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for having me. I'm very delighted to be here. You know, what you've done in journalism is just absolutely amazing. And we know the history of the Black press. And I can't think of you without thinking of your dad, the great Dr. Calvin W. Rolark. So thank you so much for having me.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure. And we record history every day, and so you and I are making a little bit of history right now just to be here together,
Thank
and
you.
talk about what you do with History Alive and just your engagement in history as a profession. What was your path into discovering your love for this topic?
You, looking back on my life, my vision is 2020. But as I was going through the process, I didn't necessarily know that it was a process. I mean, history's been my passion since 8 years old. My report cards used to come home, John's a good student, he just talks too much. But when history was being taught, I was quiet and I was paying attention. And then my parents exposed me to a lot of stuff. I mean, it was because of mother that I got to go to Pearl Harbor for the first time. We would go to different places of historic significance. And even now, if I travel for whatever reason, there's got to be some history in it. And I've had a lot of influences over my life. Hanging around with the right people at one point changed my life, but also watching a different world on television where I saw folk who looked like me going to college and I had to tune in every week to see what was happening on Hillman's campus. So there was a lot of things that influenced me to go this route. And at some point you begin to understand what your purpose in life is. And for me, it is teaching the principles of leadership and teamwork to the next generation using history as the vehicle through which to do it. And so I get an opportunity to do that in a lot of different places. But yeah, but that's it in a nutshell.
So tell us about History Alive.
So John W. McCaskill, History Live, teaches the principles of leadership and teamwork to the next generation using history as a vehicle through which to do it. And so I've had the opportunity to present, sometimes in contemporary clothing, sometimes in period attire, and just presenting aspects of history that maybe people didn't know about, right? And it's funny because when I was in graduate school, a lot of my papers leaned towards African Americans in military history. And so, you talk about the Tuskegee Airmen and Frederick Douglass and so many others, and that's how it was for me. And so we do that. I also take people on excursions down on the National Mall where we'll go and talk about the memorials. I have various tours that I can do there. A standard tour, and then there's a Black History tour and a military history tour. It just depends, and we'll go and we'll talk about them. Many times people will see these memorials and be like, "Man, that's nice," but not understand the symbolism and the stories behind it. And so that's what I also do as well.
So the reenacting part, that's what fascinates me. I want to talk a little bit more about the other, but that's the whole reenactment. I definitely love when the Emancipation Day events happen, and there are a couple of folks from DC who you can always count on, dressed in civil rights, what am I trying to say?
Civil War attire.
Civil War attire. Thank you. And yeah, they were fighting for civil rights too. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, is there a group, or do you all do this together? Is it collaboration? And how? I mean, how did you decide that you wanted to reenact in some of these characters?
It's one of those things where you end up doing something, you don't see it at the time as being significant, but over time it does become significant. To answer the first question, there are groups, and I know a lot of them, and Dr. Frank Smith, he can tell you there are a lot of folk in this area who do Civil War, USCTs, United States Colored Troops. I'm also part of Historic Aviation Society, where we do anything pertaining to aviation from as early as World War II through Vietnam. And so there are different groups around that do those types of things. And, I think I got exposed to this. I think I was just doing a program down on the National Mall of the World War II Memorial. I was working with the Park Service at the time. And I just got a couple of pieces of B3 jacket and a crusher hat. And we had a program down there one day, and we invited swing dancers. We invited a whole bunch of other folk, and I met some folk who I am working with now. And, you know, the excitement, the only thing that's the most exciting thing, second to reenacting itself, is finding and researching your kit, right? Mm-hmm. So you look to find out who was wearing what during what periods. I mean, the Civil War attire around 1872 starts to change, and you find that out. And then there are different places you can actually order this stuff from. Wow. And some stuff is listen, some of this stuff is authentic, right? I got a flight computer for maybe like $20. I think the person who put it on eBay didn't know what it was. And, you know, so that's how you end up finding that stuff. And if you don't know about it, then you go to people who are doing it and say, hey, what do I need to complete this kit here? So I do everything from my earliest impression is Revolutionary War, as late as the 1960s. I call that civil rights Vietnam. So I've got a civil rights, a 1960s outfit that I have, but I also have Army impression, infantry, right? Vietnam. This was the third pattern around 67, 68. And then I built a helicopter impression. I think one of those pictures showed up. And now I'm building an Air Force pilot, Daniel Chappie, General Daniel Chappie James was a fighter. He fought in 3 wars. He's considered a Tuskegee Airman. And so I'm building an impression around him. Now, I don't normally do the person. I do maybe in first person somebody who was with them. So I can tell various stories. It's what I call historical theater, right?
Exactly.
Much of it is like a lecture, right? Except I'm doing it in first person. And the other part is acting this thing out as if I was really there. And I stumbled onto that, and it has worked. So that's what I do and how I do it.
So, you know, I think one of the things, and that's exciting, that, you know, we try to encourage people to visit museums. We've got some amazing historical locations throughout the DMV. But there's something about that person like you, the reenactor, who can tell that story that really brings the history to life. You know, I'm just wondering if you've ever had sort of a powerful or an emotional moment, you know, when sort of the response that you got from your audience really impacted you.
Oh my goodness. Yes, ma'am. I mean, and that's like most of those experiences. I was thinking about, I've done programs for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I've been doing programs for the past 3 years or so. And the first time I did my Vietnam impression, you know, as I went through, as the year changed, I would sing songs that were top at that point, right? So you had Motown and all that stuff. But afterwards, you know, a young kid came up and he's asking me questions, and it really got to me. And you know, and because his grandfather just died, but his grandfather was a veteran. So, you know, I was telling him just how great his grandfather was. Stumbled over Miss Amelia R. Jones, who was in hospice when I met her, and she had no idea she qualified as a Tuskegee Airman. Wow. And before she died, we were able to get her Congressional Gold Medal as a participant as a Tuskegee Airman. And oh my goodness, there's another instance. Nathaniel Johnson, African-American guy. He was at World War II. I asked him, what did you do? He said, oh, man, I'm a truck driver. I'm like, you were part of the Red Ball Express? Man, let me tell you, I lit up. He started tearing up. And about 20 minutes later, there were some middle schoolers who were dancing some of the swing music, and they were in step. And I said, oh, that's nice. They're in step. Then like 26, I'm like, wait a minute. Somebody had teaching that. Went over to him. I said, hey, see that guy over there? Just go over there and thank him. And we'll talk about it later. And he went over there and started thanking Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Johnson starts tearing up again. And I got a picture of all of them standing around me. And they were 7th graders at the time. This is quite a while ago. Those kids now are in college or finishing college. And it's interesting that whatever they've chosen to do, part of it is because they're standing on the shoulders of Mr. Johnson. So that got me. But I think the biggest story right now is Calvin Bouknight, who was a McKinley Tech graduate, 1959. He was in Vietnam, conscientious objector and a medic, and he was killed in the first major battle, Ia Drang Valley. And he won the Silver Star posthumously, but it was never on his headstone. And this time last year, you know, after going to the superintendent, we got that. We had a service for him, a remembrance service that thing moved me. Most of the people in the program were from McKinley or Army or whatever. And my keynote was the first African-American female medevac pilot, which I didn't know until like 2 days before. I'm like, well, you never told me that. So yeah, it's sometimes I have to pinch myself, say, man, am I really living this thing out? And yeah, I am.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated with history and stories. I could listen to you all day long because it just seems like you just, the path takes you to so many different directions and opens up so many doors. It's really, really interesting. In the opening, I talked a little bit about, the establishment of Memorial Day, not really realizing, and I'm glad that James Wright in our paper wrote about what happened in Charleston, South Carolina. How can you add to that story? Can you give us any more details about the history of this holiday that we're all celebrating with cookouts and what have you?
Yeah. So, listen, I have to read the article, but I'm sure it's been covered. Charleston, South Carolina, Black folk are going out because, most of the other folk who live in there, they left. They abandoned their properties. And so Black folk are there and they're putting, it was called Decoration Day at the time, and they're putting flowers on the graves of these folk who served. Over 209,000 men of color served in the United States Army and the United States Navy during the American Civil War, and 38,000 of them died in the process, spilled their blood in the sand. And so you've got Black folk going out, putting flowers on their graves, and pretty much all of the graves of those who fought for the United States Army during the Civil War. And it started to catch on. And by 5 years later, that thing is catching on. It's all over the place. But, we've got it documented that in 1865 was the first time that it was, we've got it. The earliest we've seen is 1865. Now, some people may argue that President Lincoln did a similar thing at Gettysburg in 1863. But what those folk in Charleston, South Carolina did caught on. And within 5 years, this thing is something huge. As a matter of fact, the first 5 times they did at Arlington National Cemetery, it was on the portico of Arlington House, which is known as Robert E. Lee's house, although it wasn't his, it was actually his wife's, but he lived there for about 30 years. And it got too big. Then they moved it they built an outdoor, I can't think of it. It's like an outdoor stadium, but it's there. And Frederick Douglass speaks at one of them. And then it's too big for that and end up building another arena for that. But it's caught on. But it was originally Decoration Day. And it is to honor those who have laid their lives down for something greater. Listen, I know folk barbecue, they have a good time, but it is a day to remember, because somewhere I read that there is no greater expression of love than when someone is willing to lay their life down for someone else.
Oh, wow. I hate to end this conversation, but if I have to, that's a good note to end it on, because that just shows the power of love. Exactly. I'm really happy that you were here to join us and to share that bit of history with us. I might want to bring you back, because I think there's some other, we at the end of the year, we always talk about New Year's, but what is it? I'm having brain damage this morning, but
you talking about watch night?
Watch night.
Listen,
the story of watch, we can't get into it now, but we want to talk about that.
I know. You call me and I'm there, Sister D. I promise you.
And all the traditions that go around that. And if there's some others, we're going to, want to bring you on to share some history and culture that folks need to have. They can try to take stuff out the libraries and out the museums and all, but we're going to continue to talk about it. We got to share this with our kids.
We're going to tell it. We're going to tell it.
Right. So I want to thank you so much, John McCaskill, for being with us, History Alive, and keep doing what you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you, ma'am. You too. And looking forward to the next time.
Okay. All right. Take care.